Welcome to One Health Wednesdays, where all health connects. I'm Dr. Julia Zammit. On the podcast, we're dedicated to breaking down the silos between health disciplines to address our world's most pressing challenges. Whether you're in public health, medicine, veterinary science, wildlife management, or environmental conservation, this podcast brings you insights that bridges our collective fields. Each week, we bring you conversations with thought leaders and innovators who are applying One Health principles to create sustainable solutions across the globe. This week, we have an exciting conversation with Thomas Lecomte after this brief note from our sponsors.
To all the incredible professionals and mission-driven teams listening, thank you. Thank you for the care you bring, for the hard choices you carry, for showing up even when the process feels heavy. At One Life Epi Solutions, we see you, and we're here to support you every day and through the rough patches.
So, hi Thomas. We've just met, so I don't know much about you, but I do
Hi,
know that
Julia.
you are very much into regenerative farming and soil health. We had like a brief conversation on LinkedIn, so this topic is very much it's exciting to me, interesting. I've read a lot about it. I'm not a regenerative farmer, but I try in our little fields in Malta here, and my family is very much into it. So I am excited to hear all about what you have to bring to the table and have a little bit of a conversation about challenges and yeah, and the floor is yours, Thomas.
Yeah, well, hi, Julia, and thank you very much for having me in the podcast. It's a pleasure. Thanks as well for reaching out, and yeah, I mean, I'd be happy to dive into the discussions and exchange ideas. I guess there are quite a lot of common grounds between One Health and regenerative agriculture approaches. So yeah, happy to discuss.
So, what's your background? How did you get to where you are today?
So, well, first I'd say I'm an agronomist by training. So I studied agricultural engineering, and then for the last 20 years, I've been very much involved into farm management with different situations in different contexts. I started my career in Africa, so I've worked for about 10 years in Africa, managing large-scale farming systems, both with livestock and then cropping systems. I've been working in large uh, farming estates in Central Africa in Congo
Oh,
for
wow.
private companies. I started as a young agronomist in the fields, and then growing up as a production manager and then general manager of farming operation. It really drove me into a lot of interest towards both large-scale systems and their impact in the environment and the food systems. But then that's also where I guess I started, gradually making the link between soil health as a main driver to farm profitability, but also environmental impact. So I came back to Belgium in 2015, and then we started developing consulting projects with a few friends and agronomists, and that's where the idea of soil capital farming started, and we ended up co-founding the company, Soil Capital Farming, where I am one of the co-founder. So it's a still young, I would say, and small company in Belgium that I co-manage with my partners, and we provide both farm management services and strategic advice or consulting to landowners, to farmers or investors that wants to develop regenerative agriculture projects. And we do that in Belgium, but also abroad. Um, so I'm I'm used to travel a lot actually. So I've traveling is a big part of my job because actually we focus quite quite much in Latin America,
Oh, wow.
where I've been living as well. I've been living in Uruguay, Montevideo, for 2 years to develop and grow the business over there. So now I'm back in Belgium more for family reasons, but I'm still continuing to oversee and coordinate our projects in Argentina, Uruguay, and Brazil, whilst the rest of the team focus more in Belgium, Eastern Europe, um, sometime in Africa as well. We still continue to have some contacts over there.
Wow.
So yeah,
I didn't know that
that's a
you
bit my
worked so
background.
internationally around the globe. That's very exciting to hear. So you have a little bit of
Yeah.
experience about like the wildlife livestock interface as well, and how that can also affect farming and maybe even the attitudes
Hmm.
of farmers, because I would say that that is something that is difficult for people to battle, because it
Yeah.
is a battle for people who have a business and their livelihoods really can be changed, and especially in Africa, and I wouldn't, well, probably in Belgium as well, but maybe not as much in Europe, but I would imagine in Uruguay as well.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, we if you mention wildlife, yeah, I spent 5 years in a very large cattle ranch in Africa. So we were really like it was a bit of kind of a cowboy lifestyle. So long days, gathering herds, fixing fences and working in the fields and the grasslands, and of course there were a lot of wildlife. I mean, not crazy level, but the I mean, when you handle and consider large herds of animals in very large scale areas, and we were talking of above 50,000 hectares, for example, of natural savanna. So it was a very um, natural, I would say almost organic livestock breeding systems with grass-fed
Hmm.
beef. So the only food was basically the grasslands managed in kind of holistically with rotational grazing, and yeah, and the wildlife and how it interact is something you at some point you need to take into consideration if you want to properly manage the operation. Uh, Predators or other aspects of that. So it's a real complete system thinking rather than
Hmm.
just a linear process of
Yeah.
meat production.
And
Yeah,
when
yeah.
you were talking about grazing, when you, because obviously grazing when you're rotating, was the wildlife also included in that, or was it because of safety you tended to kind of, fork off where the livestock were?
No, wildlife was not really integrated into the holistic plan because first there was not so much ruminant wildlife.
Hmm.
So the wildlife was more about yeah, a few predators
Everything.
or
Okay.
wild foxes or snakes or stuff like that. But so no, the grazing management was only about cows
Hmm.
and beef. Yeah. Hmm.
And in other parts of the world, is it something that you try to integrate, or is it also something that you don't really need to because you're not in that part of the world where you have wild ungulates?
So far in the project and the farms where we've been working, we never really had to integrate wildlife. But I know that in countries like Argentina, there's a lot of wildlife conservation initiatives, and I think the holistic grazing management sometimes also try to integrate the handling of the guanacos
Mm-hmm.
herds, which are these kind of wild llamas wandering in the south of Patagonia, and it's actually a species that became a bit invasive as well
Okay.
because of lack of management
Mm-hmm.
and lack of proper overseeing or control. And so I think I've never really been involved myself
Mm-hmm.
directly, but I think I heard some systems who try to also integrate this part of the ecosystem.
Right. Yeah. Sorry, we've gone on to a tangent. It was just something I was interested about. Um, so
Yeah.
really, really, we're here to talk about One Health, and essentially, I think regenerative farming is, in my eyes, pretty obviously fits into the One Health idea because it talks about food security, we're talking about the environment, we're talking about agriculture, as well as many other facets. Um, is there anything that you would like to add? Why do you think that regenerative farming is so important nowadays in Europe and the rest of the world to combat these, well, I don't call them health challenges, but our challenge, our daily challenge is, I think, environmentally, agriculturally.
Mhm. Yeah, well, I guess one of the main, I mean, we could start with that. I think one of the main similarities between One Health approach and regenerative agriculture is that they both share an idea of system thinking, again, like I was saying, and they both tends to avoid considering silos or thinking in silos. So the main, I guess, foundation is that everything is connected, and there's a lot of much more benefits in trying to understand the different parts of an ecosystem being connected rather than working in a linear way without connecting these different parts. So and then I guess everything starts with the soil, with soil health and its microbial life. I think it's really the core starting point for regenerative agriculture. Our main goal is to regenerate soils, and and the great thing I think is that when you look at the whole system, well, you start with I mean, first you start with farming practices, which then affect soil health. Healthier soils will lead to healthier plants, that plants that have better plant immunity and more like nutrient density. So healthier plants then will lead to healthier forage or food, which means healthier animals. But then also, if you have a healthy food, you have healthy humans, and then you basically close the loop. So I think it's of course it's a bit conceptual when you look at that, but I think it's a key concept, and it's not just a slogan. It's really like a clear ecological succession or cascade that is really backed by microbial science or microbial facts. So the whole link between soil health down to human health, I think, is really key. The whole story also and amazing research that really compare the soil microbiome with a human microbiome or animal microbiome is fascinating, and I think is a key action point for our global health. So
Yes, I think that's a
I
very
guess
good
that's where,
point.
yeah,
Actually,
and
it's
yeah,
something that I think I kind of forgot or maybe overlooked in the when thinking about regenerative farming, this our microbiome, the soil microbiome. It's something that obviously is very important, but I think we tend to kind of forget about that. That is also very much linked. Do you
yeah,
think so? Even if essentially, I know it might be a bit of a larger question, but do you think people who are not working on the land, um, would that really affect their microbiome as well? Or do you think because they are eating meat and they're eating vegetables and fruit and anything that is growing, it's still could be affecting them in a positive or a negative way?
I mean, no, I don't think that not living on the land is an issue. Although, of course, living in the countryside and having a diverse living style and being able to be outside in connection with nature is really helping. But I think the key element is really about food diversity, and the nutrient density of food. I'm really not a medicine or a doctor, but I mean,
No,
I
of course,
understand
but it's
with
part,
my, you know,
yeah.
yeah, our
It,
yeah, I mean, my agronomical background, I've been working for years feeding animals and then feeding myself. So I mean, if you just pay a little bit of attention, it's clear that uh, food should be considered as a very first medicine instead of going to the pharmacy. You should pay attention first of what you eat. And there's then so many topics we could discuss about the lack of proper nutrients, the mineral deficiency, the excess of sugar, etc. So I think that's the key starting point of the general human health. All the autoimmune disease and cancer, pesticides, toxicology, everything's in the end comes back to farming practices and
yes.
microbial life, both in the soils and in our gut.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
And I mean, again, this is something that maybe listeners they might hear regenerative farming and they might have a basic understanding of what regenerative farming is. But would you be able to explain maybe a little bit of the maybe farm practices where you would start when you go onto a farm, a small scale, large scale, maybe
Mm,
one with livestock or not, just basic. Where would you
mm.
start with regenerative farming practices?
Yeah, yeah. So it's Regenag in short is a conceptual approach that is based on a set of principles, at least five, up to sometimes six core principles that are very transversal to any farming systems and that we try to use and apply as much as we can. Um, and before I list these principles and we delve into that, what is really important that, of course, not every farms are the same. Every farms are different. Some grows vegetables, some others show livestock farms and fruits. But these principles are transversal and can apply almost in every situations, taking into consideration the context, of course. So the first principle, and there's no order of priority. I'm just listing them as they come. But one of the first um, core principle is we try to reduce, I mean, optimize and ideally reduce the use of synthetic fertilizer and chemical pesticides in the system. So it doesn't mean that we are systematically going organic. Organic means the suppression, complete suppression of any chemicals or fertilizer in the system. But we try to minimize them as much as we can. So we reduce the application of synthetic nitrogen or phosphorus. We reduce the use of fungicide, herbicide, and insecticide. And that really helps to first reduce direct cost, which has an economical impact on the farm, but then also reduce the toxical pressure and the artificialization, I would say, of the natural fertility. When you add synthetic fertilizer on the soil, you don't help the soil to thrive on itself and to develop its own natural fertility, which allows to feed, mineral and nutrients to a plant in a natural way, like a forest basically would do. It's a bit like if you go on systematically on fast food restaurant and you continue eating very quick, very, processed, ultra processed food or sugar on a daily basis, you end up destroying your own capacities of taking fundamental nutrients from food. So that's the first core principle. And the second one focus more on soils, and it's about soil coverage. So any soils in nature should be, is always covered with vegetation. If you look at any, except in the desert, of course, where it's not raining, but anywhere you have soils and rain, soils are covered with vegetation. And so we try to apply this principle and use both work with crop rotation, but also using cover crops to make sure that each time you harvest one crop, you have directly, you can follow up with a cover crop. And the idea basically is to have living roots all year round in the soils, because root activities means microbiological activities as well, and that keeps the soil alive and thriving and nurturing. So that's the first two principle. The third one would be tillage reduction. So we try to reduce the intensity of tillage. So plowing, for example,
All right. Yeah.
which is a practice that has been widely used and adopted since the agricultural revolution. And the objective of tillage was basically to control weeds and accelerate the mineralization of the soil before planting seeds and growing a crop. But the thing is that on the long term, repetitive, deep, and intense tillage tends to destroy or at least reduce soil microbial life. It also creates a lot of other negative impacts like soil compaction or also soil erosion, basically, because you break the soil structure, which end up being eroded and run off away from the fields. So tillage is one key element we try to reduce. Ideally, sometimes going towards no-till systems, where you never basically use any agricultural equipment to plow the land. In this case, we would use no-till planters or direct tillings. Or at least when still tillage is necessary, we try to use a minimum tillage equipment, so reduce the depth of tillage, etc.
This
So
is what
that's
we
also
try to do here.
yeah.
In the land we have, we try not to till the land, but it's always
Okay.
heartbreaking when I see people next door, like with the
Ah,
big
yeah.
machine, and they're just like going through it, and then you try to have a conversation with someone of like it's probably not that good for the soil, and then these
Yeah.
conversations come up of like, but you have to rotate the soil, and I'm like, do you have to rotate the soil?
No.
Like, it's hard because I think it's so traditional. Like these are people who have been farming for so long, and then we come in and we're like, we don't plow our land or we don't till our land at all.
Yeah.
And I think everyone thinks like we're a bit crazy.
Oh, yeah. It's really really embedded into traditions, and that's sometimes one of the main roadblock we face when we want to change practices, that people just say, well, we've been doing that all our life, and our fathers and grandfathers did the same,
Exactly.
so why would we change? That's that's a key element of the discussions. But clearly, yes, turning the soils upside down doesn't make sense. It's not a natural process. It's acting against the natural aerobical developments of microbial life. So what I want to say here, if you turn the soil upside down, all the organic matter that is above ground suddenly find itself digged deep inside the soil, which means no more oxygen, and then the natural decomposition of this organic matter cannot happen in the best way. You also tends to break and destroy, all the microfauna, insects, earthworms. Earthworms are key components of soil life. When you have a deep tillage operation, you basically turn the house upside down and break it in slices. What do you think is going to happen with insects and earthworms? They're going to leave. And we are talking about beneficial insects, beneficial earthworms, who are critical for the natural fertility of the soil. So yeah, many reasons to say that tillage is not helping. Again, we're not saying that every farm should switch to no-till, because it's not always as easy. There are sometimes good reasons to do shallow control tillage, once every 2-3 years, for example. But a deep plowing operation twice a year is really not to be considered, I think.
You must find
So
it quite
yeah, and
difficult to change ideas. It's I think
yeah,
that's the I'll let you continue because you have a couple of principles you still want to cover, but I think that's one of the biggest
mm,
problems in health in most newer ideas, that it's just so difficult to communicate change. And
mm,
so I think that's something that's, I don't know. I feel like that is probably your biggest challenge. I don't know. Obviously, you can tell us more, but it feels like that is most of the time where people really find barriers to change.
yeah.
So,
I mean, it's what we often say with colleagues and other agronomists is that we talk a lot about soil compaction, which is a real technical issue. The fact that soil is compacted and then roots cannot develop properly, and the reason most often is tillage. But then we often say, I mean, in a funny way, and of course, no offense for any farmers, but we often say that sometimes in a farm, the biggest compaction problem is between the two ears of the farmer. So his mental approach is so compacted and so entitled to follow what he's been always doing that he won't change. And you need to spend more effort in trying to convince him and explain him and showing, opening his mind, decompacting his mind more than the soil. Just a
that's a
side
nice analogy.
reflection. Yeah. So yeah, and so if we continue in the list
Yes,
of
of course.
principles, I guess the next one is maximizing diversity or biodiversity. And here it's also a kind of a wide concept, but the idea is, if we look at cropping systems, is to increase the diversity in plant species in time and in space. So increasing in time means, if you look at the crop rotation on the same field over time, you try to have a maximum of different botanical families or different species, basically, throughout the whole rotation, like a 5-year cycle of rotation. We'll try to have to avoid monocropping, monoculture. Like
Mhm.
maize over maize all the time is really not helping. But if you can have legumes and then cereal and then a root crop, and then that's something that is key to sustain soil health and soil microbial life. And then we also play with diversity in space. So at the same moment, in the same place, we try to combine different species together through, for example, what we call companion cropping. So you would grow two species combined in the same field, and these species would basically combine their growth cycle together, and you can find sometimes more benefits than growing them separately. You can also use multi-species cover crops with up to 10 species mixed together. This is really good for the biomass production, but also the root diversity in the soil. And again, it's really the same approach as managing your own diet of food. Is you try to diversify the the mix of plants and yeah.
Sorry, I'm
And
interrupting.
yeah,
But
yeah.
do you try to use also plants that are native or indigenous to the area, or it because farmers tend to obviously have the crop that they want to grow, or do you try to use ones that are more, because obviously in my mind you would tell me more, the soil that is in Uruguay would probably prefer more indigenous plants over, I don't know, in Belgium where you would grow different plants. It's just, I don't know. It's just a question I was
Yeah, yeah.
thinking. It's maybe a little bit of a permaculture idea here. I'm swinging into a different
Mm.
team a bit.
Yeah, well, exactly what you just said right now is key. If you look at perennial systems, look, so fruit production, for example, or if you want to reforest with trees, which is or play with agroforestry. So anything that is perennial should really take into account the selection of the right variety or species adapted to the local context. I think it's a key principles that any agronomist should consider. If you look at annual crops, there still are varieties and species that are varieties in this case that are more adapted to certain contexts, but then annual crops like cereals are more meant to be you know commercialized into the commodity markets. So it's always the same species, so wheat or rice or maize, it's the same species, but then you have variety that will adapt more. But coming back to fruits, so we work as well with perennials. We have project with citrus in Latin America. We work with almonds and olives. We work with many types of different dry and fresh fruits. And in this case, yeah, really especially because these productions are crafted, so you have the rootstock and then the cultivar that you crafting that you attach to the rootstock, and the selection of the rootstock. The main criteria is the adaptability to the local soil and climate and context,
Amazing.
and it's a key element. And also in reforestation, because we have projects, for example, in Patagonia, where we try to reforest and reintroduce trees in degraded areas. We would always favor native species because these are the ones that will last much longer than exotic species.
Great. Sorry, I had another tangent. I just thought it's better I ask the question now before
Yeah, yeah,
you carry on.
no, no, sure, makes sense. And so yeah, the last principle. So we discussed pesticide and fertilizer reduction, soil coverage. We discuss soil tillage and diversity, and the last one is the integration. When possible, it's not always possible, but when possible, we try to integrate livestock and trees into cropping systems. So
Well,
it's a bit similar to diversity, but also more specific. So especially when we discuss about the integration between livestock systems and cropping systems, it's both of these farming sector, unfortunately, has been really disconnected through the agricultural revolution and the intensification, sorry, of agriculture generally. So nowadays, you can drive, for example, in in um, in Latin American countries, long roads, and you have on your right crop fields, and on your left feedlots or pasture with livestock. But these two words are not communicating. And when I say not communicating, it's mainly in terms of fertility transfer. So there's a lot of organic fertilization sources that are made available through livestock, okay, mainly through cattle manure. There's also many other benefits due to control and holistic grazing. and that is unfortunately not made available to the cropping fields because these two systems do not communicate, they do not integrate together. And what we try to do is reconnect that, working, for example, on a long-term cropping rotation in which we will integrate a grazing phase at some point. So we would switch, for example, a wheat field to a pasture, a temporary pasture for 2-3 years before coming back to crops. We would try also to recycle cattle manure and organic manure as a source of fertilizer, especially if you reduce the synthetic fertilizer, then you can use organic source of fertilizer. So really, the livestock and crops should really be much more connected. There's a lot of benefits into that. And then trees, that's where we talk about agroforestry. So we try to have fields that are a mix of annual crops and tree lines. And the trees can be used either for timber or for fruit production. And it require a bit more of knowledge and thinking a bit out of the box, because you need to take into consideration, of course, the spacing between the trees so that you can still get into the field with a tractor and harvest your crop or seed or treat it. But it works. I mean, if you plan, if you design, you can have a combination of trees and crops, and then there's a lot of benefit into that, because trees would have deep and long rooting systems, which helps to recycle nutrients in the soil, making them available for the crops. I mean, then it's also, of course, a diversification in revenue for the farmer, because now
Yeah.
he can both works on revenue from his annual crops, but also from the trees. So it's really about making the farms more resilient somehow.
Yeah. I would imagine then even because obviously seasonally you have more crops coming in and then you have more production and you can sell at different times of the year maybe a little bit more,
Yeah,
or you have different crops you're selling at the same time of the year as well. And I think maybe it would be exciting for a farmer or someone who owns land to do that. Though maybe you'll be blowing their mind as well because they have to learn about different kind of crop and trees. And I guess if it's something they've never had to deal with trees before, it's a completely different
yeah.
form of farming.
Yeah, sure. It really require um, yeah, I mean, to open one's mind to other systems and to think a bit differently. But I think it's key if we want to keep the farms being resilient and adapted to both economical shocks and climatic shocks as well.
Mhm.
So yeah, but really it works. We've been involved in several similar projects, and it's always interesting to see the benefits.
And do you have issues with, okay, we're talking about farmers usually, so they're one key stakeholder here to accept a regenerative principle, but do you tend to have issues with, for example, policymakers or, I don't know, even the consumer with these kind of newer principles that you'd be adapting to different areas?
Well, yeah, there are some always some misconceptions or misunderstanding. I think at the consumer level, um, s- there are some consumers, and we totally get that, who sometimes see regenerative agriculture as a kind of a greenwashing fancy
Mm,
word, and because they don't really understand the fundamentals and this conceptual approach. Sometimes people prefer to have very how can I say that, some very simplistic and linear explanation rather than conceptual system thinkings. So that's sometimes one of the blockage we can see, but but hopefully, luckily, I would say, the majority of the consumers, I think, really understands the importance of uh, food, food health, or I would say, yeah, nutrient density. So it's a key starting point. In terms of policy, you said, yeah, I guess, well, there's obviously many things to do uh, at policy levels to improve things. What is sometimes a bit annoying is that you have some, I mean, policymakers tend to set objectives or measures, but they also sometimes happen to be quite fragmented or not very coherent together. So they would sometimes subsidize farmer to put a cover crops, but then they will sanction them if the cover crop is not destroyed at the right moment and or before a certain date, which sometimes doesn't really make sense because climate is changing, is not always the same. So yeah, there are some improvement that should be done for sure, the policy side as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that's always something that it's difficult to always get science and policy to meet in the middle. Just because I think sometimes, well, my experience is that the there's a lot of funding that might not necessarily make sense. So sometimes there's quite a lot of push towards pesticides, but
Yeah.
and then um, and then when you talk to the farmers, they also they feel like they can't get away from the pesticides because they're still stuck in these like monocropping ideas. But and then it's difficult because it becomes this kind of vicious cycle of they they feel like they cannot get away from using the pesticides, and because the government tends to subsidize certain ones, then it tends to it just feels like economically they will they feel like they can't get away from certain methods or principles, and it's quite difficult. And I think in certain countries like in Malta, I've had a couple of conversations with farmers, and it's not easy to move away because economically they feel like they cannot move away from certain things, because obviously they feel like it's a big plunge or a big investment into something that is like an unknown maybe for them. It's like telling someone to
Yeah.
invest in something like, I don't know, maybe someone understands cryptocurrency, but like invest into, like a cryptocurrency or something that they totally don't understand, and to like invest into something that is like a completely new idea. I think regenerative farming is maybe more understandable than the different kinds of currencies, but that's me as a scientist.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's clear what you just said. It's one of the common also misconception we hear is that shifting to regenerative agriculture means losing money for the first year and then coming back into profitability, which is actually not something we observe and we see in our daily work. Um, I think I mean, transition to regenerative agriculture doesn't mean losing money. We can develop and secure farm transition through which the profitability is maintained from day one, and through which you don't have, this famous J curve, which is a financial concept through which you first need to lose money before ramping up and coming back into production. That's not something we observe because our approach is to start from day one in reducing the direct cost. That was the first principle I mentioned. So reducing the use of synthetic fertilizer and pesticides,
Mhm.
and tillage as well. Tillage is a big source of cost. When you work on all this leverage, you reduce the cost. If you reduce the cost and you maintain the yields, which is obviously a clear objective, well, the gross margin of the farm is improving. Is actually never dropping. So you can, even if the yields drop a little bit in the beginning, but at the same time you reduce the cost. So if you run the calculation, the gross margin is not affected.
Great.
So
So
that's
that's going to be
the
our
key
the
element.
next way of pushing people to transition to regenerative systems. I'll start
Mhm.
concluding because we're running away with our time
Yeah,
or our schedule. I have a
no worries. Yeah.
question for you personally. Do you have a farm or a piece of land that you manage yourself? Just out of curiosity.
N- uh, no, not personally. I don't own farm. But I mean, with my colleagues and partners, we are
Mm,
involved in daily farming operations because that's one of the service we do is that we
mm,
provide complete farm management services to landowners. So we don't own the farms, but we take care of the complete daily
mm.
operations. So from buying the seeds down to commercializing the crops, taking into account as well the administration or the certification. So we really act as farmers, and we
So
do that
you are
on more than
essentially a farmer as well.
yeah. I mean, it's we are almost, and we do that on more than 25 farms in Belgium. So it's really
Amazing.
we keep ourselves close from the reality. And except from that, well, I have my vegetable garden that I try to manage, which is yeah also
So
helping.
you are a big promoter of having vegetables in your own little piece of land as well, not only um, managing farms, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I guess for anyone getting as close as possible to fruit production is important, and a nice and easy way to start is growing your own vegetable. It's even on a very small scale, it's still helping because you always learn something, and at least you get closer to this part of the realities of the food system. Yeah.
Mm. I mean, I remember when we started, it was pretty frustrating because there was a lot of eaten plants by other critters, and there's lots of snails here. So there was a lot of management. But what my experience is that we've been on this land for 3 years now, and almost four, and the land has thrived. It's incredible. Like the adaptation of the plants to the land. You can see that some plants just don't want to grow on over here, and some are just like thriving, and they're just you don't know what to do with it almost. So it's
Yeah.
crazy, like when you work with the land, like you see and observe what is going on. And I always like try to tell people like I think we so many, like so much died for us at the beginning, and then at one point it just like clicks from it's crazy. It's obviously the microbiome in the soil and everything is like suddenly coming together. And
Great.
I thought that's, for me, that was, it's amazing to see what a big change, but it's a lot of patience, that much. And obviously, we're just doing it recreationally, so we're not throwing lots of ideas at it. We're just kind of doing it. And I think for like someone who has like a small piece of land, that is maybe a little bit of encouragement of to keep trying, because it is very exciting when things kind of start clicking and things start working, I feel.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. I think you just said it. It's really about doing it rather than trying to master everything before starting or learning and reading books and etc. You just need to go out and start and do it, and then you learn so many things. Especially that everything takes time. Farming is not something that happens in one day. There's many constraints, but then when you keep it up, then you quickly also notice how thriving it can be, and how soil is important, and how climate as well impact food production systems, and it's really like coming back to the the most grounded realities of our planet, I would say.
Yeah. So I'll just say one more question and then we'll conclude. So what's
Yeah.
your long-term vision for your work?
So it's a good question. I think one of our core um, vision and ideas is, I mean, it has always been managing farms, and I think with my uh, partners and co-founders, what we would love to do at some point is managing our own farms, and probably doing that either in Europe or in other part of the planets to where farming can be interesting. But I mean, the idea really is to keep as close as possible to the farming production, being farmers ourselves. I think that's a very important aspect for us. We're happy to advise, to provide technical assistance and consulting services, but we would not do it if we would not be farming ourselves. Uh, Keeping our hands dirty and being boots in the ground. That's really what keeps us connected to the realities of our work. And then when that happened, I think we always love to share and transfer knowledge and educate. Creating raise the awareness of people in general. So once farms are being managed and run, then we can use these farms as lighthouse farm and invite people in community to understand how transition works and how basically farming works. Yeah.
Amazing. No, sounds like a good plan. I like that. So,
Mhm.
I just like to say thank you, Thomas. Do you have anything else you would like to add before we say our goodbyes and carry on with the rest of the day?
I mean, and yeah, it was a pleasure. Maybe as a conclusion, if I can encourage anyone listening to this podcast, is to try to get a bit closer to the farming realities. I think it might sometimes seem a bit complicated or difficult to organize, but I think there's many ways to get closer to farmers and understand their realities. If you live in the countryside, you can go and pay visit to your neighbor farmer. If you live in the cities where you go on the holidays, you can stop by a farm, ask questions, understand how it works. I think farming is such a core part of our society and such an important factor in the environmental impact that we are creating as humans that I think it's key that anyone at some point should spend a bit of time in learning a bit more about farming and farmers. Farmers are amazing persons and people with whom there's always so much things to learn. So that would be my idea to share for today.
Thank you. I think that was a great conclusion. So thank you, Thomas, and thank you from the One Health
Yeah,
Wednesdays team. Yeah, and have a good
thank you
weekend.
very
Have a
much.
good rest of the week. Carry on your amazing work. I'm very excited to see what else you're up to in the future. So yeah, and we'll keep
Yeah.
connected.
If your organization is looking to implement One Health approaches or needs epidemiological expertise, One Life Epi Solutions offers customized consultations to meet your specific needs. Visit our website to learn more at www.onelifeepisolutions.com. And don't forget to join our growing community by following One Health Wednesdays and One Life Epi Solutions on LinkedIn and subscribing to the podcast on Spotify and Apple. Please share this episode if you found it valuable, and together we can spread the One Health message.